Northern Ireland, just the latest issue for the Prime Minister after a worrying set of local election results and the growing cost of living crisis. So does the Conservative Party need a total restart to set a new agenda? Well, former Brexit Minister David Davis, a Tory grandee, says yes, and he joins me now to reveal his plan. So, look, let's kick off with the Northern Ireland Protocol because, of course, it's the story of the day. You quit as Brexit Minister under Theresa May's
pretty much
government over exactly this. So, do you think Boris has been too conservative here? Does he just need to get rid of this damn thing?
Well, I think, look, the risk of just throwing it out, exercising Article 16, changing it unilaterally, is that we end up with a trade war with the European Union. Nobody wants that. They don't want it because they've got zero growth at the moment. We don't want it. So the trick is to find a diplomatic way through it that works for everybody. Now, one of the big things that the Unionists are reasonably concerned about is the barrier effectively in the Irish Sea between the rest of the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland. There are ideas for having a sort of green channel so that most of the trade, which is just between ourselves and Northern Ireland, has no implication for Europe, and that can be done with no regulation at all. Then a red channel for those things that might risk going south. That sort of idea. Now, let me just make one point, however. The Good Friday Agreement was there, the way it was designed, was not to give ultimate power to the majority. It was that every minority had to be respected. And when it was created, the Irish government and other governments said, yeah, that's a very good way of approaching it. It's no different now that the minority is a Democratic Unionist Party. You still got to respect the minority. So we need to find a conclusion which fits for everybody. And Boris is starting the right way, I think. And if I were him, once he's done his tour of Northern Ireland, I would go to every capital in Europe, and actually say to them, look, this may have been designed to preserve the Good Friday Agreement. Actually, it's undermining it. Actually, it's destabilising it. Actually, it's doing harm to Northern Ireland. None of you want to do that. Let's find a proper way through. That's the way to do it.
Good idea. OK, let's move on from Northern Ireland because, of course, there is a host of problems facing the Prime Minister. You have a plan, though, David Davis. You have a plan that you think can restart the party and see Boris re-elected if he were to stick with it. So run me through what you're proposing.
Frankly, it's pretty simple. I mean, it starts with that most conservative thing of having low taxes. It is, after all, what we promised in the election, right? And what's happened is we've been driven off our course by COVID and a variety of things, but principally COVID, and all the economic impacts and trade impacts and so on. Now, first thing, therefore, is to start cutting, is to reverse, not cut taxes, to reverse tax increases we put through. We shouldn't have put NICs through. We shouldn't have put the increase in national insurance through. We shouldn't be putting through an increase in corporation tax. Why not? Because we're actually collecting more taxes than we ever have before, partly because we're growing faster than anybody forecast, or we were until last month, and partly because of what they call fiscal drag, which means basically as inflation comes along, you don't get your tax allowance increased, you still pay. So as your wages go up, you pay more and more taxes. So those things have meant we've got vast amounts of money. We've got about 90 billion more. Remember, all this was about raising 12 billion? We've got 90 billion more than we expected. So put that right first. Why? Well, number one, cost of living crisis. It solves that. It doesn't solve it outright, but it does a great deal to solve it. Number two, and actually more fundamental almost, is it if we carry on as we are, we're going to stop our growth rate. And we've been saying it. People like me, people like John Redwood, have been saying this for a year now. Bingo, last month the figures proved it. So that's the first thing.
Stop pretending to be a low-tax party and actually be a low-tax party.
Absolutely.
What about housing, though?
Well,
that's another huge issue.
Then you come down to basically three other big issues in my mind. What I'm looking at really are the big issues that people worry about. Now, when I was in my 20s, 65%, nearly two-thirds of my generation bought their own home. Now it's a quarter.
Shocking.
And the rents you pay, if you don't, enormous rents people have to pay. So they've got no chance of saving up the money to buy their own home. Now, why is that? Well, because population's increased by about 7 million, and so we're about 1 million short in number of houses, and about 100,000 houses a year short too. Now, what happens? If you try and do that, people say, I don't want you building next to my house. I don't want you building next to my village. I don't want you taking up my green space. Well, why don't we start building garden villages and garden towns? If you took a helicopter across the United Kingdom, as I have to do too often, if you take a helicopter, it's like flying over a golf course. Most of it's not urban, You can actually do that. And if you did that and you allocated, let's say, 1,000 acres here, and you make a lot of money on the increase in value. Massive.
Like that.
Yeah? And some of it will go to the landowner, of course, but a chunk of it should go to paying for the community centre and
we'll get those houses we so desperately need.
All those services.
Without upsetting the NIMBYs.
Without upsetting the NIMBYs. And, you create new houses, they will be bigger. At the moment, our houses built today are half the size they were built in the 20s.
Oh, I know.
And they're the smallest in Europe.
Yeah.
So you can have bigger, cheaper, better houses with good services. What's not to like about that? So that's housing. Then you've got education. When I was at school, this country had the highest social mobility pretty much in the world. Now, we're about the lowest, along with the Americans. What's the big thing there? It's education. And I think we need to completely start re-engineer the classrooms. Because today, if you look at children at the age of 11, half of the children from free school meal homes, which is one measure of poor homes, half of them are failed by the time they're 11. They haven't got good enough English or good enough maths to do all the other subjects. We can't let that go on. So it's a question of really, and we've got lots of technology now, AI technology, screens for kids and so on, give them the best possible lectures, diagnostic tests, there's loads of things can be done there. So that's the second thing, And the third thing, frankly, and this is the one that will cause negative reaction, I think, in some quarters, is I think we should be addressing the complete reform of the health service. I mean, it's always been, Tories have been afraid of this subject because people say, you're trying to privatise it. No, we're not. I want free at the point of delivery. But, Germany has free at the point of delivery. France has free, and Austria and Sweden, but they have better cancer care results than ours.
Yes.
They have lesser queues than we do. They have better coronary care. And so all of these things we should be aiming to get for our people. And I think there is now a sort of gap, as it were, in the market, in the political market. I think because people can't get to see their GPs, because they're queuing up to get cancer care, because their tests have been late and so they may die before they get treated. I had a couple of those cases in my own constituency. There is an appetite to think about this again. We now spend...
Honest conversation about the...
Honest conversation. We already spend more than the OECD average on our healthcare now. Not quite as much as France and Germany, but we're catching up.
And we get worse results. That is
worse results for more money.
I think that's a good plan. Yeah. Hope Boris Johnson was listening. Will he do it?
Oh, I don't know. I hope so.
David Davis, former Brexit Minister, thank you so much.
Thank you.